10-0 in a Fight Night co-main event slot to buried on the prelims. We have big-time Olympian Mark Madsen, and he's taking on Vinc Pichel in an interesting fight in the lightweight division, because if you consider this fight overall and you want to play a little bit of a game, you add the ages up between these guys, and we're up there. We are really up there. You have 39-year-old Pichel, you have 37-year-old Mark Madsen. I get it. Even as an Olympian, he was an older guy competing. He was able to get that one done. Silver medalist in freestyle wrestling. But when you look at it for Madsen, I say it's kind of odd because he was in a co-main event slot. There was a lot of attention
in his home country, though, where he won an Olympic medal. That's why he was so far up on the card.
But there was a big-time opportunity for him his last time out, taking on Clay Guida. That card taking place over in Las Vegas. That one with Cannonier and Gastelum as a main event. But if you do look at it for Madsen, he takes on the Carpenter, and in that fight, I don't know if, like, Fight Ready, they were whispering in his ear, have your Khabib versus Salah Quinta performance. But Mark Madsen only went for one takedown attempt up against the cage, albeit Clay Guida's squirrely. Doesn't matter if he's 25 or 45. Clay Guida's one of those guys, he's always moving, pitter-patter, throwing a lot of volume.
Just a lot of that hair.
His hair breaks out in about the end of the first round. And if you do look at it for Guida, great defensive hips, really good takedown defense, really good offensive takedowns when he's a better wrestler. But Guida in that fight showed us a classic Guida performance. Didn't really get his chin checked. He was able to really kind of bust up Madsen from the outside, and Madsen just walked him down. And the thing that I noticed out of Madsen in that fight, because it's been a buzzsaw for Madsen in the UFC. He finishes Danilo Belluardo in his UFC debut, looked really good in that fight. He fights Austin Hubbard, looks really good at the start of that fight, able to get the decision win there. And against Guida, it's a split decision win for Madsen. I watched that fight, and I honestly had a hard time scoring the rounds. It was that close. It really was. And I looked at it, like, one championship-wise, I looked at the total of the fight, and I thought, okay, Madsen walked him down. Madsen fought behind the jab. Madsen won the fight to me, but it was a tough one to score. Round by round, it really was. So I look at this one. It was originally scheduled to take place at UFC 271. They rescheduled the booking between these two guys. But again, Madsen, we know, wrestler. The best one, maybe.
He's extremely limited in his MMA skill set, though.
Kind of like Mike Grundy. And you saw Mike Grundy, again, Mike Grundy's last time out against Makwan Amirkhani, really extenuating circumstances. Father, terminal illness there in front of him. You know, we're fighting at home in England. He goes in there, quickly goes for a takedown, gets submitted by Amirkhani in a defensive submission. That could happen to Madsen. Vinc Pichel is a tricky fighter because he's from California. He's trained in California for a long time. Late career switch over to Factory X. He had the guys and Mark Montoya and crew in his corners last time out. Beats Austin Hubbard. Looked really good with his striking. Really crisp. Great kicks to the body. Good combinations to the head with his boxing. Long range attacks. Switching stances as well. If you look at it, his fight against Jim Miller, even against Hubbard, gets taken down, and I'll talk about those takedowns a bit. Gets taken down by Jim Miller. And in the Roosevelt Roberts fight, too, he's just so physically imposing when it hits the mat that he's able to reverse these positions. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it against Madsen, but hell, I don't know if Madsen's even going to wrestle in this fight, because I didn't see him do it in his last fight.
I also don't know if Roberts was ever really UFC caliber. He had a lot of hype, but anyways. The weird thing about Marco Madsen is, and I've had people come at me in my DMs over this, I've been about 20% lower on him than I think the consensus MMA fan has been, because even going into the Hubbard fight and the Guida fight, like, there's a lot of holes in his game, and the more you start watching MMA, you care less about people's strengths and you focus more on their weaknesses, because 9 times out of 10, if you're going to lose a fight, you're going to lose it in the same way that you've lost it before. Like, people have these weaknesses, and then other people will watch that fight, and then they realize, hey, I can take advantage of these holes too. We've seen Madsen run into a bit of a roadblock where it's okay, you're still having success, but it's not just wrestling has become an issue for you. Now we throw cardio on top of it. Now we throw on top the fact that, well, you're not the greatest submission threat once it does hit the ground. So if you do get a takedown, the fight's probably not going to be over immediately once you do secure it. And if you're not able to just hold the guy down, get into that really heavy half guard or full mount position, your ground and pound's not really of the level of someone like an Islam Makhachev who can just go out there, hold you down, make you feel their presence, and then they get the finish. So Madsen, to me, especially when he's fighting these, and I don't even look at Pichel as a borderline ranked fighter, but when he's fighting, I would say top 25 up guys, well, those people aren't just sort of one-trick ponies, and he is going to have a really hard time against people who can offer more than just initial takedown defense and some striking. And I know this fight against Pichel is sort of the Hubbard fight, but leveled up a little bit, because what's Hubbard good at? He's good at defending takedowns, or at least later on into fights. He has pretty good volume, and he's a good rangy striker on the feet. Pichel shares a lot of those same attributes, but Pichel has much more power, I would say, than a guy like Hubbard, and he has far less kicks, too. The thing that I've always struggled with Pichel is, and you had mentioned it, he doesn't have great takedown defense, but he's not a bad grappler by any means. So I'm going to be very curious to see if he is able to have any wrestling success against Madsen, or if he decides to initiate any scrambles. Because for Madsen, like you had said, he wasn't wrestling heavy at all in his last fight against Guida, but I would think that that has more to do with his opponent than anything. Because like you said, Guida's just so squirrely. He's always doing something. And if you do waste your energy wrestling a guy like Guida early on, then we know Guida's going to be able to come back strong in that second and third round. So I do think we will see a more grappling-heavy version of Madsen. I'm just curious if Pichel can have any success on those in-betweens, especially up against the cage. Because in the middle of the mat, I don't think he will have any success whatsoever. But in the cage, Pichel's the guy who, he's been in a lot of fights against a lot of top guys. I'm curious to see if he'll have any success in those areas.
Going to the Walmart frozen food section for that. And when we look at it for Vinc Pichel, if you really do look at the way that he fights, when he's up against the cage, decent elbows, decent abilities to kind of get out of that clinch or at least reverse position. He's another one of those guys. Again, it's going to sound silly because for Mark Madsen, you look at it, you look at the wrestling, so on and so forth. Greco-Roman, if I said freestyle before, that was a mistake by me. But Mark Madsen is one of those guys with a Greco-Roman base. It's going to be a lot of throws and a lot of upper body strength. For Vinc Pichel, he's one of those guys, a lot of upper body strength. Poor takedown defense in the UFC. It's at a 25% mark. You got to look at the ways that he's getting taken down. So again, his last time out there, you're taking on a guy in Austin Hubbard, and you get taken down 4 different times. And I want to mention how it happens. First round, again, he's throwing kicks, and the kicks are getting grabbed, and he's getting taken down. He gets taken down by a single leg. It's a lot of different things that Madsen might be able to initiate the takedown off of those things, but it's not one of those things where, you know, a Greco-Roman guy is going to think, oh, I'm going to grab a leg kick and take him down. It's not to say that Madsen can't do it. It's just not one of those things that you see all that often.
Greco-Roman's very trip-heavy, though, and if he catches a kick, that's going to open up all those trips. So I genuinely think Greco-Roman is going to help him a lot in this, because this thing with Madsen, again, he doesn't have much submission ability. His ground and pound isn't great, but his wrestling is going to be able to win him rounds at the UFC level, and that's been able to carry him so far. I genuinely look at this fight the same way I looked at the Hubbard fight. Madsen's going to have success until he doesn't. I'm just wondering where the sort of fall-off begins as to when Pichel's going to start to have a lot of success.
It'll be interesting to see, too, how Madsen makes out with another camp at Fight Ready. Obviously, in the main event, you have the Korean Zombie who's made the move over there. Since he's come back into MMA, I mean, I think from the Bermudez fight on, he's had Eddie Cha in his corner. For Madsen, second time out there, big time opportunity. Obviously, Coach Henry Cejudo loves to pump up his fighters and have weird fighter pillows at his house. I find that very odd. For Pichel, though, I definitely give him the advantage with the striking. Much more dynamic guy. Has a lot more pop at the end of his shots. But again, it comes down to, when does Mark Madsen wrestle? Will he decide to wrestle? Let's see what happens coming up in this one. So if we look at the odds for this fight, Pichel open as the underdog, plus 130s, minus 137 over on that site. If we look at it for Madsen, open to minus 120s, plus 113. If we have a look at the total Tapology votes, Matt, surprise to us, they are to you. I know Madsen's the underdog, and he opened as a favorite, but I'm going to say Madsen over under 65%.
I think it'll be slightly over.
And it is over. 1,677 total votes, 72% Madsen, 81% by decision. For the 28% that have Vinc Pichel, 78% by decision. So people seeing this one going by way of decision. For Vinc Pichel, he hasn't finished a fight in some time. I know he has a really deceiving record in the UFC. It's kind of crazy. 7-2 in the UFC. Lost to Rustam Khabilov in the debut. The only other loss is to Gregor Gillespie. His last finished win was over Damian Brown, who never had a boring fight back in 2017. So again, a lot of fun there. For Pichel, he's been tested in his last 2 fights with the grappling against Miller and against Hubbard. He's passed those tests, but can he do it this weekend, Matt? What's the pick here?
I think Mark Madsen's going to be able to win this fight. Again, I don't love the overall well-roundedness of his game. He really is only a wrestler coming into the octagon 9 times out of 10. His striking has shown slight improvements, I will say. But at 37, how much more can you really expect out of him, especially on the feet? He's going to reach a point where his striking does catch up somewhat to his wrestling. But if we expect Mark Madsen to ever get into the rankings and start fighting top-tier guys, he's got to get to work really soon and start becoming a lot more active. With Pichel, You kind of mentioned it for me. You did my work for me. He's not a great finisher. If he had more finishing ability, I would maybe start to side towards him. But Pichel, in my mind at least, is going to have to go out there, really rally in the second round, and really rally in the third round to have a lot of success. He could do that against someone like Mark Madsen, but I do think the wrestling of Madsen is going to at least even their cardio a little bit as this fight goes on, and that's why I have Madsen ever so slightly. But I'm going to end it on this. I won't be sold on Mark Madsen as a contender, even if he beats Pichel. Even if he beats him by first round ground and pound. He's fought a lot of these similar fighters, like Clay Guida, Austin Hubbard, and Vinc Pichel are all kind of in the same category. Like, they can offer a fun fight to anybody on any given night, but we don't look at these fighters and think, wow, they're going to break into the top 25, top 20, top 15. So Madsen, I think, needs a serious step up in competition if he is able to beat Pichel, but I think he will be able to this weekend.
Combined age of 76 between these two men. Matt going flaky on the crest with Vinc Pichel and picking Mark Madsen. For me, again, I look at this fight for Madsen his last time out. Fought behind a jab, threw a few right hands. John Anik touched on it, and then the rest of the commentary kind of piled onto the fact that Mark Madsen, when he strikes, he'll throw his right hand, dip his head out, and leave it there to the left. And even when he's thinking about striking, he dips his head to the left all the time. Vinc Pichel throws hooks a lot. And for Pichel, his last time out against Hubbard, he had him rocked at multiple different occasions. The trouble for Pichel, he fights just like Brian Barberena. In striking and in takedown defense. Barberena, a strong gust of wind to his leg, and he's dropped right down. Like, his takedown defense is porous.
And it's weird because he looks like he's trying really hard, but you're right.
And so does Vinc Pichel in that Hubbard fight. He defends the first takedown really well up against the cage. Bucks him off, keeps going, throws a kick. You push his leg and he falls down. And especially as the fight goes on, it goes that way. I like Pichel striking a lot more. And for me, I have to go with him in this fight. It is a tough one to try and get because, again, this is another one of those ones. It's going to be Mark Madsen just grinding the heck out of him. Or Madsen does what he did his last time out, strikes a little bit, and I think he's not going to have much success in that. So we're split on the pick here. Matt going with Denmark's Olympian, Mark Madsen. I'm going with Vinc Pichel in this one. You let us know down below in the comment section who you have. Are you with the Tapology voters? Are you with the odds? It's going to be an interesting fight nonetheless. Two big title fights at the end of this card that you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.